Ethics in educational inquiry. There are lots of different aspects to consider related to the ethics of educational inquiry. Some of these are suggested here. This video describes some of these different aspects and how you can make sure that your inquiry is ethical. As an educator, the ethics of your inquiry are linked to the professional judgments you will already be making about the people in your setting. For example, if you work with children, you may need to consider requesting parental or guardian consent, as well as learner consent, if you wish to video record children. You'll also need to consider what data is necessary to gather, such as field notes, audio or video data, and think about where any recordings are stored so that they are secure. Ethical issues can arise at any point in an inquiry. Take a moment to consider what the ethical issues could be in each of these situations. Recording students on your phone, using students' images in presentations, a head teacher asking to see results of observations of colleagues, students feeling obliged to take part because you are their teacher, or one class receiving an intervention while another doesn't as the control group. Here are some steps you can take toward an ethical inquiry. You may wish to consider anonymizing names before sharing data. You should check school or institutional policies. You should get parental or guardian consent where it's necessary, and also make sure students give their consent and know that at any time they can choose not to take part. In Europe, GDPR regulations legally require you to inform participants of how their personal data are being used and to store data securely. You need to tell people where you'll be using their images, for example at conferences, or to share with colleagues in other settings. In essence, an ethical inquiry is one in which you put steps in place to achieve all of these principles of good research ethics. You should also remember that some institutions might actually want to be named and don't want to remain anonymous. However, you still need to think about what this means for individual people in those settings. Pause here to consider this checklist of questions to ask yourself or to discuss with colleagues. This is also available as a downloadable resource. The questions on this screen specifically focus on consent forms and information sheets for participants. It's important where possible to get written consent from your participants and their guardians if necessary. Where written consent is not possible or appropriate, verbal consent should be gained and should still be given once participants have been told the purposes of the research and what participation will involve. Equally, any markers of assent should be monitored throughout participation in research. These are indicators someone is happy to continue, as well as any markers of dissent that suggest someone is no longer voluntarily wanting to continue. And on this final screen are some questions to consider when thinking about your findings and presenting your data. It's worth remembering that people don't generally mean to be unethical. Unethical behavior can be unintentional, so it's important to consider these issues before, during, and after your inquiry to protect the rights and well-being of all participants. You can find more information about ethical guidelines on this web resource shown on the slide here.